I would like to welcome all of you to the Eastern Cape Region Chapter's webinar tonight. The title of the webinar for tonight is Creating Inclusive and Affirming Environments for Sexual and Gender Diverse Individuals. We are very proud to also share that the colleagues from the universities that makes up or that forms the Eastern Cape chapter, they are being represented as our speakers tonight here. So the program is as follows. We will start with Prof. Elma de Vries, who is a colleague at the Nelson Mandela University, followed by Dr. Rian van der Venter, and then Dr. Madeleine Miller, Dr. van der Venter also from Nelson Mandela University, and then Dr. Miller from Walter Sisulu. Prof. de Vries, my apologies, will be talking to how can we train health professionals to create inclusive and affirming environments, followed by Dr. van der Venter with cultivating healthcare practitioners that can provide inclusive and affirming care to sexual and gender diverse individuals through role modeling, and then Dr. Miller, the pathophysiology of hate, followed by a question and answer session, closure, and then a couple of announcements that I will then make at the end of that. So without further delay, just a little bit of a background to our presenters tonight, or the speakers. Prof. de Vries has a MBCHB, a MFAM Med, a FCFP SA, a PhD in Health Science Education, and is a family physician who is passionate about the right to access healthcare for marginalized populations. Prof. de Vries is also a co-author for the SAAHE Gender Affirming Guideline for South Africa and is the current chairperson of the PATHSA, which is the Professional Association for Transgender Health South Africa. Elma is a senior lecturer in family medicine, at UCT, and then a senior family physician at the Heideveld CDC in Cape Town. And then in March 2022, Prof. de Vries joined the Nelson Mandela University as the MBCHB program coordinator, and currently Elma is enjoying the adventure of developing the MBCHB program with a very dynamic team. Secondly, we have Dr. van der Venter, who is a senior lecturer and researcher in the Department of Radiography at Nelson Mandela University. Rian has a professional background that's rooted in diagnostic radiography, but also have a background to bioethics, health law, tertiary education, and distance higher education as well. Good couple of years experience in the clinical setting as well as in academia, and lectures across all levels of the diagnostic program at Nelson Mandela University. Supervises from undergraduate up to PhD research projects, and is an adjunct faculty member at the University of Allied and Health Sciences in Ghana. They have several peer-reviewed publications, not only nationally, but international journals as well, book chapters, and has presented podium and poster presentations both nationally as well as internationally. Rian is a NRFY-rated researcher and also does many guest lectures, not only in South Africa, but in the UK as well. And then you can also see, as flighted there, Rian's research focuses spans across quite a wide variety of areas that is of interest to Rian. Then Dr. Miller, a family physician at the Cecilia Makiwane Hospital in Mdansane in the East London area. Dr. Miller is a senior lecturer at Walter Sisulu University. She provides clinical services and then also teaches and mentors the medical students, registrars, as well as the medical officers. Dr. Miller holds a master's in health professions education from Stellenbosch University, which she received in March 2025, and she is enrolled to begin her PhD. Dr. Miller is also the convener for the CMSA Diploma in HIV Management, and she serves on the CMSA Senate. As you can see, they're also similar to Dr. Prof. de Vries. Dr. Miller also serves on the executive board of the Professional Association for Transgender Health in South Africa, and she holds and has a strong passion for inclusive clinical care, sexual and gender health, as well as medical education. Dr. Miller is dedicated to curriculum development and fostering the growth of emotionally competent, patient-centered clinicians. So without further delay, I'm going to hand over to Prof. de Vries, who will start our webinar this evening. I will stop sharing now. Then, Prof. de Vries, will you share your presentation, or is someone going to assist us with that?
Yes, I
Okay,
will share.
awesome. Perfect. You can go ahead, Dr. Prof. de Vries. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, can you confirm that you can see that?
Yes.
Yes, we
All
can.
right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let me just get my oh, okay. Sorry, how do I go back? All right. Creating inclusive and affirming environments for sexual and gender diverse individuals. I'm so glad that all of you are here tonight as we discuss this important topic. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So the Desmond Tutu Foundation created this wonderful graphic of the SAAHE universe. SAAHE stands for sexual orientation and gender identity. And we know that we all have a sex assigned at birth that can be male, female, or intersex. Then there's the gender identity galaxy, where we can be a cis woman, a cis man, a trans woman, non-binary, gender fluid, agender. There's many different identities that we can hold. And then there's the sexual orientation galaxy as well, where there's also lots of different options and how we can be attracted to other people. And it's important to understand that there's a difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. So gender identity is who I get into bed as, how I experience myself in terms of gender. And then orientation is who I'm attracted to, so who I get into bed with. And yeah, that's just in terms of the diversity that we want our students to understand as well. I'm very glad that we live in South Africa. There's a lot of pushback against diversity in other parts of the world. But here in South Africa, as our president said in the State of the Nation address, we stand for peace and justice, for equality. Oh, and now this thing, okay, there we go. For peace and justice, equality and solidarity. We stand for non-racialism and democracy, for tolerance and compassion. We stand for equal rights for women, persons with disabilities, members of the LGBTQI+ community. We stand for our shared humanity and not for the survival of the fittest. And I think that that is the kind of ethos that we want our students to have as well. Just a few words about my PhD, and I'm going to try and summarize it in less than 10 minutes. So the aim of my PhD in health science education was to explore how medical curriculum change could enable the professional identity formation of a gender-affirming practitioner. And I'm just going to touch on a few concepts. So what is curriculum? This is a SAAHE webinar after all. And there's different definitions of curriculum. The one that I like is Jake Schervel, who spoke about the interlinked complex of who is taught, what is taught, how is it taught, who teaches, and within what context we teach. And then there was a lovely article by Pentecost and colleagues on the critical orientations for humanizing health sciences education in South Africa. And they describe a gap between the intended curriculum, the enacted curriculum, and the experienced curriculum. And that we see that we can be very good in our intentions. And I think tonight we'll be discussing our intentions, but what students experience might be something quite different. I just want to touch on epistemic justice and injustice as well as a concept in health professions education. Epistemic means related to knowledge. And Fricker was the one who first wrote about epistemic injustice, where people are wronged in their status as a knower. So in patient-professional interaction, the stereotype of the ill patient can lead to a form of injustice, whereby training, expertise, and formal knowledge are legitimized in the biomedical context and elevated to gold standard status, while the stories of patients are viewed as irrelevant, illogical, or unworthy. And Thomas and others applied this concept to health professions education, and I'm going to come back to that later. So in my study, I looked at the stories of trans people, and unfortunately, often in our health system, the patients are not taken seriously. Their story is not recognized, and the fact that they have autonomy as a human being. Just briefly about professional identity formation. There's multiple factors that influence this journey where we come as students with our existing personal identities and are then socialized to who we become with our professional identities. And the formal teaching and assessment is actually just a small part of that in the top right corner. So the influence we can have on this professional identity formation is limited, but role models and mentors can play a big role. And that is what Rihanna is going to talk about next. So I used this concept of professional identity formation to then look at how does it happen for somebody to become a gender affirming practitioner. And for the talk tonight, we're talking about affirming environments for the whole spectrum of LGBTQI+. But in my study, I was looking specifically at gender affirming. And our students come with existing identities. Some of our students might come with themselves being part of the sexual and gender diversity, or they might know somebody who is sexually or gender diverse. Or they could come from a very conservative environment where they've never encountered any diversity. And all these different students who come with their different identities then have this journey of becoming. And the attitudinal aspect and the knowledge aspect are intertwined into becoming and then an affirming practitioner. And an affirming practitioner in my study, I found to be somebody who sees the human first in a clinical encounter, that it is not about what this person brings, but about who they are in the first place. And that there's a power shift where the practitioner really recognizes that this is somebody who has a legitimate story that they bring and that we need to respect them. So if we now go back to Gerwel's definition of curriculum, if we start with first with who is taught, the students bring their existing identities. And we need to be aware that our students are in very different places in terms of their understanding of diversity. Then if we look at the bottom at what is taught, we want our students to understand about diversity and about depathologization, that it's not being transgender is not an illness. Having a same-sex attraction is not pathological. It's just part of that diversity of humanity. We want our students to understand about cultural humility. So there's been this concept of cultural competence, but cultural competence is somebody learning about another culture and then they are competent. So I can then, when I see a young Xhosa male, know he's probably going to go to the bush, but that is making assumptions. The much preferred attitude is cultural humility, where I come into the consultation with humility and curiosity about what the patient will bring, because we must be so careful to make assumptions. And we can't assume that all our patients are going to be heterosexual and cisgender. So coming with humility and curiosity. For medical students, learning about hormones would be one aspect. And then if we go to the top of how is it taught, reflection is so important if we want to create affirming environments, and that it includes reflection on our own position, our own power, and how that can play out. We want the learning to be integrated from early in the curriculum. And that an example of that would be when we learn about communication, that we also become aware of pronouns and can ask the patient, how do you want me to call you? And that opens the door then to say, my name is Alma and my pronouns are they and them. The voices of the affected can be very powerful. And if we can bring patient stories into our teaching of how our patients experience the health system, role models, and that will come in the next talk more, and faculty development is what we're doing tonight, of helping us all to understand more about sexual and gender diversity. So the ideal that we want is that all our students will practice patient-centered care, have empathy, respect for diversity and human rights, and know about social justice. One of the recommendations from my PhD study is that the educator-student interaction should mirror an affirming approach. So we want our students to be affirming towards patients, but we also, as educators, want to be affirming towards our students. And we know from Freire that students are active participants in their learning. And then coming back to Thomas and the idea about epistemic justice. So Thomas said we need to come back to what do we teach, how we teach, the role modeling epistemic justice, where the student has a voice, and also in the consultation where the patient has a voice. And then also rethinking with whom we teach, that we can include patients as partners in teaching, so that there's epistemic justice where the stories of patients and the stories of students are taken seriously. So more recommendations. We want to build in respect for diversity, cultural humility, critical consciousness that also comes from Freire, that we will look critically at how does power play out, and that we are aware of our own professional power in shaping the consultation. A lovely resource that I just want to mention is the practice guidelines for psychology professionals working with sexually and gender diverse people. And it's a lovely guideline about how to be affirming. And they say that an affirmative stance is an umbrella term to indicate recognizing, respecting, and remaining informed about sexually and gender diverse identities. So to create an affirming environment, if we can help our students to recognize that there's diversity, to be respectful of our diverse patients, and to remain informed. And yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it, and we can move on to the next one. And I look forward to the discussion at the end.
Thank you very much, Prof. de Vries. We will be handing over to Dr. van der Venter now, who will take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope my presentation is visible to everyone.
Yes,
It's
we
still
can
on
see, but we've
It's on
presenters.
presenter mode. Sorry, if you go to the top there where it says display settings, Rian, and you switch on the
Yeah.
display settings to slideshow. on the top of your screen. You'll see right above your slide, there's a little thing that says display settings, and then it would say something like show slideshow or switch to slideshow.
Oh. Layout maybe, content only.
It should be just on the top of your screen. It usually says swap slideshows. Sometimes it says swap. Yeah, that's right. Display settings. Yeah.
Duplicate.
There we go.
Okay. Is that right now?
Yeah, perfect now.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I'm going to share some thoughts that I have around the use of role modeling as a way to cultivate healthcare practitioners that can provide inclusive and affirming care to sexual and gender diverse individuals. And as I move through this, my disclaimer is that I have no conflicts of interest, and the views that I express are that of my own. So we've heard from what Prof. De Vries said, is that sexual and gender minorities patients face quite a disparate health inequities, which leads to poor health outcomes. And these inequities could be physical, psychological, but also are quite rooted in some communities where there's things like corrective rape, invasion of privacy, etc. But they also face other systemic barriers in the healthcare system, because the way that the healthcare system is designed and it operates is really from a heteronormative ideology. And this then makes the space in which healthcare, which is supposed to promote the health and well-being of these individuals, an unhealthy and toxic space. There's also literature that says that there's limited preparation of healthcare professionals. And if we take from radiography literature in particular, literature tells us that there's about 3.5 hours dedicated to this topic in a 4-year curriculum, and others in a 3-year curriculum across the world, which is very minimal. So when we think of role modeling, and Prof. De Vries has alluded to this in her presentation, role modeling becomes a crucial strategy in achieving affirming practitioners, because it helps to develop the professional character and behaviors through demonstrations from us as educators or clinicians, by modeling that professional conduct and communication styles and attitudes that we would hope that our students would adopt. And I want to very briefly speak about role modeling from a theoretical perspective, and I'm going to draw on 3 theories. And the first one is Bandura's social learning theory, which proposes that we as a people learn by observing, imitating, and modeling other people's behaviors. It combines the behavioral and cognitive perspectives on learning, suggesting that learning in itself occurs through a direct experience, but also through observation, even without immediate reinforcement. Social learning theory is also based on 4 key concepts that you see on the screen. And this particular theory acknowledges the role of the cognitive processes as well as the environment, and including individual characteristics that are at play during the learning experience. And that then becomes important to note why certain individuals would be more receptive to certain strategies, but also then how we then model implicitly or explicitly certain behaviors and attitudes. The second theory I'd like to draw on is the motivational theory of role modeling, which posits that seeing attainable role models, so seeing that these behaviors, attitudes, characteristics, and conduct is attainable, helps people to become increasingly motivated and inspired to adopt those ambitious goals that they aspire to or should be aspiring to. Because if they see other people being able to do it, they then see that they can do it too, and they are more motivated to become like their role models. And then the last theory I would like to to draw on is called reference group theory. And this particular theory explains how individuals compare themselves to other social groups, where they would rather want to go with the in-group, which is then a frame of reference, to adopt those particular behaviors compared to the out-group, who's then considered to display undesirable behaviors. And again, this particular theory also accounts for the different characteristics that influence the reference groups from the microcosm of the individual right through other sectors of their life. So then you might be wondering, so how then do we achieve this task? And I have 6 broad strategies with some examples of how this could possibly be achieved. I acknowledge that I speak from a more theoretical point of view because I'm an educator at a university, but I would like to believe that these strategies are transferable to the clinical environment as well. The first one is to model appropriate professional behaviors and dispositions towards sexual and gender minority or sexual and gender diverse patients, because we as clinicians or educators need to enact what we teach, whether it's implicit or explicitly. We can't be preaching one thing, but be doing something else, because our students observe, they imitate, it can either motivate or demotivate them, and then they would be doing something or not doing something. And we would like them to adopt gender affirming behaviors and attitudes. So some examples that you can think of is how you would obtain relevant sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression information relevant to a particular examination. Again, from a radiography point of view, radiation protection is an important thing. So asking patients about this sex assigned at birth becomes important, because that influences the radiation protection measures we would apply. But then also allowing students to discuss clinical placement challenges, for example, that they've had, and then having that robust dialogue and debate on how these could be done better through interaction with classmates, other colleagues, and then the educator as the facilitator of that particular discussion. We also then could help students understand sexual and gender diverse specific terminology, this population group's healthcare needs, but also linking this to our scope of practice and a human rights perspective. So we need to clarify these terminologies and needs, but then how do we use it, which context, and then link it to our ethical legal duties towards our patients. And then the use of inclusive language becomes quite important, not only in the verbal, but also in the written. And a good example, very small, but could be significant, is we tend to say good morning guys to a mixed group of people, but rather say good morning everyone, acknowledging everyone in the room. And also make your pronouns known, and that opens the door for others to be more open to you. They see you as a safe person or an ally, and they will be more open with you and more trusting. And then the fourth one is to model appropriate communication styles, and this can be done through role plays and simulations, but also showing students videos of appropriate versus inappropriate settings, and they can critique those and get into that debate using literature and evidence for that. But it brings us back to how we set up assessments. For example, when we do tests, where do we need to include the patient's sex and gender? If it's not relevant, why do we include it? Because we could perpetuate particular prejudice and bias by the wording we use, and people could interpret it that certain diseases are attached to certain groups of people. Number 5 is stimulating a reflective and reflexive practice. So alert your students to webinars, new publications, and maybe have a discussion to ask, have you had a chance to attend it or read about it, and allow them to then discuss these and allow them for reflection opportunities on how to queer their practice. But then we also need to acknowledge that sometimes these conversations can be uncomfortable for some people, because they might have some moral distress and find some tension between the individual worldviews and beliefs versus sexual and gender diverse persons. And we need to remind our students, but also our colleagues, that the patient's best interest takes precedence over their own viewpoints, because ultimately we are there to deliver a service, but also we need to know that we need to adapt to our patients to really be truly person-centered in our care. And this requires us to adopt cultural humility and some cultural sensitivity to be able to deal with this discomfort without making the patient feel unwelcome and uncared for. And that's a very short overview of some strategies that you can use. And I'm looking forward to the discussion happening shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rian, for that. And we will now hand over to Dr. Miller. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm just checking that you can see my screen and that it's in the correct mode.
Can
Yes.
see everything is clear. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I feel very privileged to be part of this panel and following two people who has actually already gone through that whole the research journey. I'm a little baby standing at the beginning, and yeah, I'll be starting with my PhD next year. So I'm in awe, and the work that both of these people, that both Alma and Rian has done is very inspiring to me as well in terms of the work that I'm looking at doing at. I'm going to come from a very biological point of view. So we've had some excellent frameworks that helps guide us in terms of how we support our LGBTQIA plus students and staff members and patients. But we're also living in an era where you might have, I'm very sure I'm speaking to the converted here, and everybody here is fully on board in terms of how do we create inclusive environments. But we live in a world at the moment that seems to be breeding hate. And especially because the social media space is making that so easy. So although you might not come across actual a lot of microaggressions within your workplace, within the social media space, we are being confronted with this all of the time. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time unpacking and understanding the pathophysiology of hate and prejudice. For those of you who have attended some of my, whatever I teach, I seem to always teach this, but I'm hoping to bring a couple of extra insights in this presentation. So I'm going to look at what lies at the root of prejudice, marginalization, oppression, persecution. And actually, this is the way human beings have rolled for thousands of years. And there's a real question, why do we do that? Why do human beings treat each other so badly? And this last year has been a real example of being quite extreme at the moment globally. So this is very much based on the conceptual framework that I'm working from at the moment. I'm particularly studying emotional competence. And it's a little bit to look at how actually stress contributes in the end to very particular behaviors. And so as human beings, we all have a survival mode that's responsible for us to keep ourselves safe against threat. And we have this fight, flight, freeze system, and we have very particular drives that we share with the animal kingdom. And the way our survival system gets us to do anything is through very particular emotions. And I'm going to make it very specific to look at prejudice and hate. And one of the emotions that can get triggered when we are stressed is rage. And rage is actually a biological impulse to destroy an obstacle in your way. And we can see that both in, for example, you might have been in a scenario where you've had somebody that was an obstacle in your way, but you also might have been on the receiving end of that. And whenever we talk about prejudice and hate, and we talk about behaviors where people are being treated badly, usually rage is at play there. And what happens is when we are in a state of rage, it actually changes the way we think. So we literally lose sort of 90% of our intelligent brain. So we no longer use our cerebral cortex or our prefrontal cortex, and our thinking becomes very survival focused. And that's a very narrow focused, self-centered survival thinking that's only able to make a decision about how to survive in the present moment of time. So Daniel Kahneman calls this fast thinking. And if you want to know what that kind of thinking sounds like, you can just go and read the comments section on social media. So when people are in that, emotional moment and you get those long rants without any punctuation, that will be this kind of thinking, and not the most intelligent part of ourselves. And so this leads to this, emotions actually make us want to, in some way, manage these anxieties. And we've got these very particular fight-flight behaviors that come up automatically. And Shujaat Amin calls these counterproductive behaviors or saboteurs. And I want to focus on the fight behavior. So some people, when they're in survival mode, goes into sort of a fight mode, and they might have behaviors like criticizing or manipulating, preaching, gaslighting, bullying. And these are all behaviors we see when we're talking about, for example, prejudice. So I want to take that a little bit and look further at some of the survival system drives that we have. And I want to look at two particular drives. So the one is that we all also, as survival, have a drive for tribe. We have a tendency to feel safer with those that are familiar to us or similar to us. This is obviously not rational. And that also means the converse is true, is if you meet somebody that's very different from yourself, might have a language or a behavior or from an idea group of ideology that you don't understand at all, we tend to be a little bit asking ourselves, is this person safe? And we tend to be more skeptical and suspicious of that person. What couples with this is also our need to have power within the relationships and societies where we are at, because within the society, the more power you have, the more possibility you have to change the world around you. And on a survival level, we all like to think that, when the chips are down, that you should have a little bit more access to those resources than other people. And these are irrational parts of ourselves that we all have. So some of you might be aware of the wheel of power or privilege that shows us how power and bias then starts to intersect. So when I speak about power, I'm talking about how much can you change the world that you live in. And some people have unearned advantages that the household that you've been born into, that puts you closer to the center of power. And then some people as unearned disadvantages that just puts them further away from this margins. And that's what we mean with intersectionality. So intersectionality is the more of these different unearned disadvantages you might have, the more vulnerable you become and the less power you have within the society. And you can see, if you look at our wheel here, our trans, intersex, non-binary people very much on the peripheries, our lesbian, bi, pan, asexual people very much on the peripheries. And you can see, for example, in the USA at the moment, people of color, if you're undocumented, if you're trans or queer, how all of these start intersecting and making you more and more vulnerable within a society. So this can give us an idea of how do you then build a society based on these different views from a survival view or a not survival view of looking at the world. And what I mean by that is that if we look at the world through our survival lens, then we call this elitism, which is based on the idea that some human beings have more value than others. And this builds the kind of societies that are always hierarchical. And you've got your powerful sitting at the top, and they get all the resources, and they decide where everybody else is going to be sitting on that hierarchy. I want us to remember that academic institutions, as a matter of fact, all of the stuff we've inherited from colonialism, all our bureaucratic systems, is very much based on these kinds of hierarchies. And it's quite difficult sometimes to then, how do we shift out of that way of thinking? What we are aiming for, and as Elma have said earlier, South Africa is one of the few countries that's really built egalitarian principles right into our constitution. And that is the value, the idea that all human beings have equal value. And this is quite an abstract concept. It doesn't belong to our survival of the fittest self. And then we start discussing things like diversity, equality, equity, inclusivity. And we want to know, how do we create a campus where every single student feels included and feels looked after? How do we create workspaces where everybody is safe? So the question then is, and everybody that's sitting, I'm sure everybody within this group is going, yes, we are relating to this egalitarian values, but the reality is we all actually have both. So if you are in survival mode, your survival system, when you are stressed, you're always going to be a little bit elitist. When we're stressed, we are worried about resources, opportunities, relationships, and it pretty much goes all about what is good for me and my people. When we are not stressed and we are able to access our executive systems, then we can start thinking about these values, about what is more important. And the challenge is if one is unaware of these two systems, then quite often your stress or survival level might determine what belief system is actually going to take precedence. So a large part of our education, and I love those strategies around role modeling, is how do we also help make our staff members and our students more conscious about which values we are actually aligning with. To be able to build an egalitarian system, we have to actively and consciously work towards that, or our survival system will just take over. And of course, the challenge is there are those that are actively wanting to build elitist systems. So I've got just a quick slide on opinion, because there's a lot talked about freedom of opinion. But as soon as you couple opinion with power and you're within a hierarchy situation, then actually there's not an equality in the world of opinion. And if you can think about it, the impact straight people's opinions has got a massive potential impact on queer people's lives. But actually the opinion of queer people, of our LGBTQIA+ communities, has got very little possibility to actually influence what will happen in straight people's lives. And we therefore say that freedom of expression is not an equal playing field. This idea that the powerful can say what they want because they have the right for freedom of expression, unfortunately, those opinions has a massive impact. So for those of us that are seniors within our departments and senior lecturers, your opinions in terms of what you think about the diversity within your department has a massive impact on those minorities within the department. So I've just got a last couple of slides just to have a little bit of a vision of how one goes forward with that. And basically what we ask, we can't get rid of our survival self, but we want to know actually how do we create a world where our best self can step forward. So in our executive mode, we suddenly have access to all these qualities and emotions that makes it possible to be more, have more perspective, have more context, be able to be logical, to be able to be more considerate. And now suddenly these amazing qualities become possible when we're actually not in our stressed survival mode. So the challenge is what do we do then when we are meeting hate, either within campus, within social media? This counts when you're dealing with bullying, when you're dealing with aggressive people within your departments. And the important thing to realize is that you're dealing with people in survival mode, and you can't bring your own survival self to that party. This will almost always make the situation worse. And it's just helpful to be able to recognize when somebody is spewing hate that actually they are in survival mode and you cannot directly engage with that. The same with even trying to have direct conversations. You can't have a debate with somebody who's in survival mode. Survival self is quite irrational. It's not particularly intelligent. It's not logical, and it's going to go for moral certainty. And so what we want to try, and the other thing that's a challenge is then, of course, what quite often also happens is we just decide, okay, I'm just going to ignore this and pretend it's not happening at all. But unfortunately, sometimes the only narratives that we then see in social media is some of these narratives. So a couple of thoughts that I have in terms of managing these is just to make sure that we're always in executive mode when we are going to tackle. If you are deciding you're going to speak to somebody or you're going to tackle a particular thing, make sure that you at least are in executive mode. And something that is helpful when we are dealing with people who are being particularly in a rage mode is that the best thing you can bring to them is compassion to the fact that they are in survival system and being compassionate for the stresses that they are under. I think that a lot of our advocacy needs to be tangential, and this is exactly what we're doing tonight. So creating opportunities where we can talk about these things, where we can post about these things, where we can put information out there, creates other narratives that can also be in social media and help to bring these ideas. My last two slides, and this is Alma actually inspired me with this book. There's also some amazing YouTube videos from Loretta Ross, who wrote this beautiful book called Calling In. And she brings that as an alternative to what we call calling out. And we're very much living in a calling out cancel culture. And with calling out, I mean publicly shaming or criticizing someone for words or actions deemed harmful, offensive, or wrong. And that can make us very vulnerable also, and I think quite scary if you are a lecturer. There's all these changes and new languages, and suddenly you say the wrong thing, or you use the wrong term, or you bring up the wrong example, and the next thing you know, you get called out. And the problem with this is that it usually just causes humiliation and it polarizes people, and it can create a culture within a campus where people are fearful or defensive. They don't want to speak out at all, or they don't speak out when there are things happening that they are unhappy about. And actually, we've seen in America that this actually turns allies against each other, everybody calling each other out every time somebody does the wrong thing. So I'm going to leave you with the inspiration of exploring something called calling in, which is addressing harmful behavior or speech with love, respect, and dialogue, and inviting understanding and growth rather than punishment. And so it's not that we ignore what somebody has said or done, but we take them aside. We accept that people do make mistakes. We assume that they actually want to do better. And we look at how can we bring accountability through empathy rather than humiliation. Thank you very much. And yeah, I look forward to the discussion where we can take this a bit further.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. Guys, we are now on 19, okay, 70 minutes after 7. The webinar is supposed to end at 7:30. I am mindful of people's time, but if there's any questions that you might have, please do feel free to pose them in the chat or direct them to the presenters, because as we have heard, they are quite excited to discuss this very pertinent topic with all of us here tonight. I would like to just make maybe not a question to anybody or any of the presenters specifically, but definitely something for me, a takeaway here, is that what I've picked up across, it is all pulled through about your behavior as a healthcare professional and how you approach it, and getting our students to understand that. Because Dr. Miller, you have put it quite nicely about having this elitist kind of behavior and and the impact that can have. And then breaking it down to how do we get that across to our students brings us to what Dr. van der Vente has said about the role modeling, and even Alma's, Prof. de Vries's talk also alluded to all of that. And yeah, I think we definitely need to have a mind shift as healthcare educators to ensure that our students henceforth, they are able to ensure that the patients all feel included and not on the outskirts of that little wheel that you showed now, Dr. Miller, because that is where our patients are. That has a different orientation than what is deemed the norm in society as it stands here. And I do apologize if some of my terminology might be incorrect, but I'm also learning here. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions from you?
Millen's got a hand up.
Oh, I can't see any
No,
hands.
right. Millen, you can just go in.
Thank you, Millet.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline, and thank you to all the speakers. It was very enlightening. And Madeline, I agree with you. We are far better off in South Africa than our colleagues in the USA, where the atmosphere is so divided and divisive also. What I want to know is, does our Walter Sisulu University or the new Nelson Mandela University, are there any policies about these sexually differently oriented students, how they should be protected or their interests should be protected? Thank you.
I'll speak to Fawusu. I'm not actually, I don't think there's a policy, but I will definitely go and research that, Milind. What we do have is we have a very active LGBTQIA plus club amongst the students, and that gets a lot of support within WUSU. So in terms of, they had a little pride march, a few weeks ago. They've had talks on the different campuses. And so the students themselves have sort of taken that on. And we quite often see that the drive for your rainbow societies, for example, at UCT as well, is quite often student driven, with the students creating societies for it. What we're not very good at, I think, is as lecturers on how we actively engage with it. And I think the one thing that I don't think we think about is in terms of our colleagues that might fall within those communities, and how do we actually, so it's interesting that I think we're not as good as the students, for those of us as the staff members. And this includes for me, I've recently been doing talks at the campus clinics, to the security staff, to the cleaners, because on a campus, for example, as well as your security guard who looks at the student's ID when they come through the gate, for example, and now makes a comment because you no longer look like your picture from first year. It's cleaners who chase people out of bathrooms. It's the same issue in our hospitals. So when we're actually talking about creating safe environments, it's not just about your lecturers and students, it's actually about the larger group of people. And that, from a policy point of view, definitely needs more, I think, needs some attention. So that might be something that might be quite nice to actually take on. Alma, you might be able to comment on, or Rihanna, on NMU.
Yeah, from NMU side, the transformation office plays quite a big role in these kind of matters. There's been a campaign recently where they've promoted the notion of inclusive language and what it could look like. So they make these little infographics and send it through internal email, like once a week type of thing. But then there's also like hotlines and ways to contact them. And then they have these events, which they call, I think, queer spaces. So it's like an hour-long support group setup, where people just get together and speak about experiences. But then they also have like a Pride March, and then they also now try to have more frequent events, like little gatherings to get together. Again, very student-led, but both students and staff are welcome to join those spaces.
Because Rian, the transformation office is actually people employed by the university, isn't it? So I don't know if we've got something equivalent at Worcester. Look, but so that, I'll look. They might be very well. I'm not in Mthatha, so I'm not sure. There might be something like that. But that's actually very lovely that there are staff that is employed specifically looking at the diversity issue.
Mm.
I know Fort Hare is also very active, the students, but I'm not sure if anybody here from Fort Hare knows if there's also something like the transformation office at NMU that's employed.
Do we have any colleagues from Fort Hare in the venue joining us? I don't quite know the names, unfortunately. But unfortunately, Dr. Miller, it doesn't seem like we do have someone from
I've
Fort
got
Hare.
a contact there. That might be quite a nice thing that we as SAAHE can look at. I mean, the one question is we at SAAHE, if that is as part of our different mandates, that we can be supportive in terms of the universities, sort of, in terms of like policies, and we can share ideas across. So like some of the things that's happening at NMU, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be quite a nice thing that SAAHE can help coordinate.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that we can put forth, because we've got Rian here, we've got many of the SAAHE members, the executive members and so forth. Definitely want to put down there then for future
diversity, diversity and inclusivity in general. So that transformation is quite a nice word for that.
Yes.
And building this egalitarian concept, which is then inclusive of lots of different types of groups and differences.
Yeah, no, for sure. Anybody else? Thank you.
Good evening.
Yes.
The name is Ethel Kleinans, and I'm from Sefako Makgato Health Sciences University.
Oh, wow. Right, welcome.
Welcome, Ethel.
Yes.
Wow, thank you for joining.
Thank you. So sorry that I joined so late. I wasn't aware of this. I did sign up for this group, but I didn't get any communication regarding this webinar. I signed up at the conference earlier this year. Anyway, I'm here. I'm doing my PhD currently, and I'm looking at the lived experiences of health profession students who identify as LGBTIQ plus at historically disadvantaged universities. So Fort Hare, SMU, and USU was part of the sample. And I unfortunately have to share the news with you. There exists no such frameworks within these historically black universities. I think in 2014 there was a grant run by what's this NGO called NACOSA, and they had money given to some universities. There were 14 universities that participated, where they actually helped set up these structures within universities. Our university was part of that project, but unfortunately the money was sent back, so nothing was done at SMU in terms of we don't even have a policy. Forte also don't have a policy, as well as WUSU. Although the student programs they run totally on their own, and so there's little support. Like I struggle to get participants at Forte. There was no office, nobody that could assist me in just and at the time they had the Sarchi chair for LGBTIQ plus at Forte, Prof there too. Even she wasn't able to assist. But anyway, the same at WUSU. There's absolutely no structure. The student affairs office assisted, but the student program at the time wasn't running at all. There was one person that really tried to show me around there, but there was really nothing. So, and I come from UJ, where we also had these policies and systems really built in with the back then with the HIV and AIDS program. But yeah, that's my little bit. So I'm also trying to see if I can also lead the policy initiative at my institution, which I'm currently in talks with the DVC responsible for that. But yeah, that's my little bit. I'm hoping to finish my PhD by March and then share the data. Thank you.
Thank
all,
you,
that's
Ethel. That is awesome. I'm sure we're all very interested in your results. And if you could share, and maybe we can even invite you to talk at one of the SAAHE events, webinars, etc. on that then. Seeing that Dr. Miller has also suggested something, along those lines, and then you could possibly be one of the speakers. Awesome stuff. And then also answered there, Dr. Miller, sorry, the fact that other universities such as Fort Hare, they also don't have any policies, etc., around this this topic. You were saying, Dr. Miller?
No, I just want his email address before he vanishes. So I thought if you wouldn't mind just sending me in the chat your email address, because I'd love to contact up, or maybe your WhatsApp number. I'd love to link up and see what you've been doing. And then yes, there's definitely more active players in the game at the moment. So you always need a champion to get anything done. You just need one person who's keen. And then I think it might be possible to get things up and going. Certainly at WUSU, and I've got a good contact at Fort Hare as well. So I'd love to work with you.
Thanks, Madeleine. I will definitely do that.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, comments?
There's a hand up from Clarice.
I
Clarice, do you?
see. Thank you. You can go ahead, Clarice.
Good evening, colleagues. So I'm from Rhodes University. We have the Office of Equity, Institutional Equity and Culture. I'm a lecturer in pharmacy, but I'm also a hall warden in the residence system. And within the residence, so the the Office of Institutional Equity and Culture speaks to those to this kind of aspect of transformation. And then within the residence system and within the SRC, we have transformation reps that also speak to educating, raising awareness and opening dialogue within the university and amongst the students regarding these issues. And so there is awareness and I think a lot more than was there before, and also an attempt at integrating this into orientation as well as programs throughout the year to raise awareness and get students more engaged and discussing on this much more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clarice. Much appreciated sharing that information from Rhodes University as well. So it seems like there's some movement regarding this. Yeah, quite eager to see where we can take this, because it's important for us to be able to ensure that we are all inclusive when it comes to, be it staff, be it students, and their interactions with the patients, the communities out there. I have noted that it is now.
Sorry, I cannot find the raising hand button here.
No problem.
I just wanted to say that at some of these campuses, the students are really doing a lot of good work, but their work can only go so far. If they don't have people inside that can help them build these structures, then unfortunately nothing is going to happen. I looked at the curriculum just at the two universities, the medical curriculum, and there's no movement whatsoever in terms of bringing in those LGBTIQ healthcare. It's not different at our more advantaged or more resourced universities, because they also struggle, though they had the policies there. That change is really slow and difficult, but just in terms of having that institutional support would really help if we could set up something to really support those structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ethel. But we can have a community now here, like Madeline has asked, to share your details, because it can start small just by collaborating from this webinar going forward and making sure that we are able to then get the wheels of change turning just a little bit quicker. So I think we have now come to the end of the webinar because it's 25 to 8. What I would like to also just share with you, I hope that you will be able to see my screen on your side, is that the SAAHE Eastern Cape chapter's strategic planning meeting will take place later this year, a little bit towards the end of the year. And then at that meeting, the activities for this chapter for 2026 will be discussed, and then we will share that with all of our members. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the presenters tonight for taking the time out and just sharing their knowledge and information around this. And yeah, hopefully further collaborations can take place. So thank you very much, colleagues. Much appreciated. Rian, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like us to share as the...
No, there's nothing else.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. You must all have a lovely evening further, and we will be in contact with you soon after the strategic planning meeting. Have a lovely evening. Take care. Bye.